Welcome to the Potion Podcast, your raw look at the hospitality industry, brought to you by SHC.
What's going on, everybody? My name's Dallas. You're listening to Vic Food Stories, and this is the place where we talk about food in and around Victoria, BC. And in this instance, we're going to be talking cocktails, podcasts, businesses, books, all sorts of stuff. I'm very lucky with the fact that Shawn Soole is sitting here with me right now for this conversation. Shawn, how you doing?
I'm doing very, very well. Thank you very much. At the end of my day, we've cracked a bottle of wine, got a bottle of Rathjen Rosé sitting on the table.
Dude, I got to say, this rosé is so smooth, and it's just like, I'm not good with wine. Like, I don't know it very well, but this thing is like, you could drink that whole bottle easily, I feel like.
I'm going to drink that whole bottle during this interview.
Dude, it's just so light. It's just like refreshing.
Yep, it's fantastic. Wild Ferment Rathjen cellars up in the Como Valley. I just ordered a case here for Clive's. That's going to be our house rosé for the next little bit. And away we go.
That stuff's money. So what would you pair that with, ideally, do you think?
Oh, like something like a good salad with like salmon on top. Some feta cheese, beets. Yeah, feta cheese, beets, nice salad, big slab of salmon on top.
Be perfect.
Yeah, it's crispy side down.
So the first time I met you was at Cafe Mexico.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
Mike and I just walked in and we
had your doubts.
No, we had no idea who you were. Like, I didn't know you were this powerhouse doing like a million things. And we walked in because you were redoing that place after the fire.
Yep.
And yeah, we just walked in and we're like, who is this guy? he's crazy with the stuff he's doing there. And ever since then, I've been wanting to talk to you again. Just because online, like your Instagram, everything you do, we were talking before the podcast started, and the amount of stuff that you do is insane. Like, I think that I sort of push it pretty hard, but I can't imagine doing what you do with the amount of videos you put up. You know, you mentioned you have 4 podcasts.
Yeah.
So maybe let's start with the podcast. What's going on with your podcast?
So 2 years ago, January 2019, I started the Post Chef podcast, which I wanted to do. Like, I can't remember what sort of drew me to doing that at all at the time. To be honest with you, like everybody says now, like, oh, everybody's got a podcast. If you're a middle-aged white male, you've got a podcast. Blah blah blah. I can't remember what drew me to it, but it was something that I think was cathartic, and we talked off camera. I started listening to Gary Vee and getting me and myself in a different sort of headspace. And I was like, you know what? I think that I'd like to do this. And so I kicked it off, started with the first episode. My second episode, I think, was with Solomon at Pagliacci's, and he's my best friend in the world. And we just... You just finished there, right? We just finished the renovations there, which was huge, brand new bar and everything. And so really I sort of geared it towards like taking over a family brand that's 40 years old. Yeah.
One question about that. It's pronounced Pagliacci's, right?
Pagliacci's, yeah.
It's not Pagliacci's.
Not Pagliacci's.
But Pegs is correct.
Pegs is correct.
That's correct.
Yes.
But it's Pagliacci's.
Pagliacci's, but Pegs is correct.
Okay.
So I sort of kicked it off, and then it started rolling. I think I went to San Antonio just after that for the San Antonio Cocktail Conference. But yeah, it was something that sort of grew organically for me, but it was something that I wanted to do for the industry, not so much thinking that there was a gap in the market for or anything. So Post Shift started as a podcast on Tuesday and Friday. On Tuesday is my little like weekly rant about work-life balance or stuff like trying to demystify what a lot of kids think about the industry and about pillars in the industry like myself, and how they sort of perceive brand ambassadors and how they perceive like this cool, like what you said, like you see on social media, like I do a ton of stuff, like that's also very stressful and can be depressing at times, and being an entrepreneur is not the easiest thing in the world. So I try and demystify those sort of things and bring a little bit of realism to it all. And then Friday I do an interview with an industry stalwart. So whether it be Zoom calls now or in-person interviews. And then fast forward to January this year, I started doing the BC Spirits podcast, which is my sort of passion project about BC craft distilleries and spirits. And so I do a tasting podcast on Wednesday, and then I do an interview with a distiller or a producer on Thursday.
And is it the producer that made the thing that you tasted?
No, because usually it's BC Spirits. I do a spirit a day every day of the week.
Okay.
And then I've got a group of like 6 really talented at-home mixologists or at-home bartenders who create cocktails on a daily basis as well. So I tag them and repost a lot of their cocktails on the thing because they do great cocktails with local spirits. So I'm like, I don't need to develop any of these. I've got great people who are doing it for us, and then it plugs them and so on and so forth. And then on Wednesdays, I usually do a big tasting grouped up. So I've done like elderflowers. Like last week was the elderflower liqueur off because we had like 4 elderflower liqueurs that I tasted side by side. I've done whiskey offs. I've done all the cassises and Kia Royales. So I did an episode with my wife, which she only makes a very light appearance every now and then on my podcast. But on the back deck, we set up the bar, and I pulled out all the cassises I have in my collection, which was like 7 cassises. And I got a couple of bottles of bubbles, and I made her Kia Royales, and then she picked her favorite Kia Royale out of all of those. And so then Thursdays, it's getting that connection. You're the same. You want to get that connection about this industry is very passion driven. And so you want to figure out why that person does what they do. Because when people look from outside look in, it looks super eccentric and weird and doesn't make any sense to the general consumer. So you want to make that connection, like, why are you doing this? Like, did you set up a distillery in Duncan and decide to make vermouth with Rathjan Cellars? I had Jessica from Ampersand last week.
And of course, there's a whole story behind why that was done.
Exactly, and like where they came from. And I think the biggest surprise for me was Josh from Montrachet Spirits up in Revelstoke. He was a deep underwater welder for like the military and the oil industry, and he did his back in. And so then he was like, well, I can't dive anymore. So semi-retired to Revelstoke and decided to open up a distillery and welded everything himself. So all his stills are all welded just by him.
That's sick.
So yeah, so it is a ton of work producing 4 individual episodes every single week.
And again, do all 4 of those have video or just some of them?
Most of them have video.
Yeah, the video is really the part for me that adds the time.
Yeah.
The audio, if I was just doing audio, it's fine. Like I can do that and it's great. Once you throw the video in, and especially when you have multicam like this, where you have to start toggling back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that adds a bit of time.
You're even more advanced than me. Like I keep it super simple, like one shot straight to the money.
You're doing yourself a favor.
Yeah, one shot straight to the money. I keep it nice and simple. But I also see when it comes to the podcast, it's about how do people digest your message. Like some people like to listen, some people like to read, some people like to watch videos. So I try and take away as many barriers and hurdles as I can. I'm trying to get to the stage where I'm actually transcribing every single episode of my podcast into written as well.
Would that be a human doing that, or is there services that would do that?
There's a couple of services, but to really get it right, you've sort of got to download it and then put it through like Fiverr or something like that. I use Fiverr a ton for that sort of services where you get like copywriting and stuff like that. But yeah, like it all depends on how people digest to think that someone's only going to digest your information on YouTube or on your podcast. It seems very narrow-minded when you just put it out everywhere.
One thing I've noticed actually is people originally said they would only listen to podcasts. And since they found out that I have a video version, people have been transitioning over to the video version.
Exactly.
Because they want to see the people. But it's like they didn't realize that they actually like to consume it that way.
Yep. So just go take away the hurdles.
You do. And I think that, I mean, these conversations are happening. It's just a matter of, do you want to spend the extra time to deal with having that extra bit of content as far as like adding a video?
Yeah, and I think any piece of content is like I used to say to my friend, like a shotgun blast against a barn side. Some things get through for certain people. Some things don't get through for certain people. Some people don't have 10 minutes to sit and watch a video. Other people do. So it just all depends on how you want to absorb it.
Or 2 hours.
Or 2 hours.
And some people have said to me that I should make these shorter, but I kind of feel like if there's content and it's flowing, just let it go. And if somebody, I kind of like think you can pause it and come back later, then there'll be more there for you. But if you don't want to hear it all, that's okay.
See, I think you need an assistant so you can just chop it up.
That'd be sick. I would love to have an assistant. But I mean, there's no money transpiring with this ever, so I can't afford to pay anybody. But it's pretty amazing. Like for me, you know, starting on Instagram, taking photos, it now has transcended that. And now for me, it's about connecting with people. Like I do want to tell the stories because it like showing the food that's being made is amazing. because that tells stories in itself. But when you talk to the actual people, like that's for me now where the real magic is. And it's just the transfer of energy when we're getting together and chatting. And I find a lot of value in that for like me as a human being.
Well, I think COVID, if anything, has peeled away a lot of the glamorousness of the industry in a way that, like, as a restaurant operator or a head chef or something, like, you could have a horrible day and then service starts and it's and you're smiling and you're touching tables, kissing babies and stuff. And I think humanizing how much work it takes to be a restaurateur or to make it a certain dish or to work as hard as you do to sort of aspire to a certain level, having someone like yourself to sort of peel those layers away and sort of show like the, not detriment, but like the amount of work it takes and the sacrifice it takes to get to a certain stage.
You almost have to be crazy to want to do it.
Oh, 100%. On some level. Where everybody in this industry is mental. If you're in a restaurant, you're clinically insane. I'm
really, really good friends with Rap and Roll. I'm basically part of their family now, like literally. And like I'll be there 3 or 4 hours after they close. They're still working. Yep. Then the next morning they're going to be there 2 hours before they open, and they're just always there. They don't get time off. Especially when they did the Beirut fundraiser a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So what that meant was they're now committed to now 2 weeks without a day off. And even on the day off, they come in. Yeah. So I can totally appreciate, after getting to know a lot of people, just how serious it is. Yeah. And it is that fine balance between necessity and happiness. And I think with hospitality, people is always toggling bit by bit. Like some days you're just like, oh, this has got to end. Like I need a day off. But then the next day something happens. You're like, I'm so happy to be in this industry. I love this industry. I had a great shift, great customers in tonight. Everybody had a great time. We're in our deep down DNA, we're people pleasers. And that's what it is. That's why we can all laugh at Yelp reviews and TripAdvisor and stuff like that. But like when if you're an operator and owner, like you really get one of those, it guts you like a fish. You're just like, oh, you left my place not happy. And that like we want you to feel happy and warm when you walk into our place and when you walk out of our place. Happier and warmer when you walk out of our place. So I think we're these ingrained DNA people pleasers. And so it's always this toggle between happiness and just necessity. And it is always one of those, you have a good week, you have a bad week. You have a good shift, you have a bad shift. And it's just like almost like a drug where you're just like, oh, chasing always chasing that next high. Because I've seen so many times, or not so many times, but quite a number of times where I've been talking to someone that I know and they did get like a 1 out of 5 review. And it doesn't matter if they normally get 5 out of 5. That 1 out of 5 totally crushes them. For days. Yes. For days. And it drives me nuts that people, if there is an issue, like go and speak with them in person. If they don't handle it properly, then do what you need to do. But like give them a chance, because quite often places I think do want to have you be happy when you leave, and they're going to do right by the person. My wife is the most understanding woman in the world when it comes to that, because like I can be on a massive high for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then something happens and I'm on the floor. Like instantly. Yeah. And you're just like, oh, just took the wind out of your sails. You're literally like a massive ship. And then all of a sudden something happens and you're this little dinghy in the rough waters. And you're just like, but why is this happening to me? Yeah. What do you think when someone comes into an establishment, what's like the number one most important thing for creating the type of experience you would want someone to have? Oh, see, this one's a hard one because I've always contemplated this one. I think it's a symbiotic relationship. And I feel, to a degree, the symbiotic relationship between restaurant and customer has sort of devolved a little bit in the last 10 years because of online and social media and so on and so forth. It should be a symbiotic relationship where the person's coming in to experience what you have, and you're there to give people that experience. And I think it's devolved a little bit, whether it be culture or franchises or anything like that, or being something for everybody. I think at the end of the day, it's this very tenuous balance of keeping your mission statement and your mantra of like what you want to be, and also keeping everybody happy at the same time.
with also the realization that you're not going to be able to keep everybody happy all the time. Like,
of course, there's always going to be some random person that you just will never make happy.
Exactly. But I think there's that symbiotic relationship of give and take, of I'm here to take whatever you're willing to give, and you're here to give me what you are offering within your little constraints or boxes of what you do. You know, you don't go into a Michelin star restaurant and ask for a hamburger. You know, same reason you wouldn't go to a pub and ask for caviar. You know, I had that back in the day here at Clive's, way more aggressively back in the day when we didn't really have cocktail culture in Victoria. We wouldn't do cosmopolitans. And people were like, you don't have Jaeger? Like, what sort of bar doesn't have Jaeger? I'm like, well, go across the street and ask if they have Cynar. I've got Cynar in the well. I'll pour you some Cynar. No problems in the world. But so it's this sort of interesting like where you wouldn't walk into a high-end cocktail bar and order a Jaeger bomb, but you wouldn't go to a dive bar and order a perfect Manhattan. You know, it seems to be demonized when you walk in and ask for a Jaeger bomb in a fancy restaurant or a fancy cocktail bar, but it doesn't get you'd never, a customer would never ask for a perfect Manhattan at a dive bar.
Do you think it's important then to sort of create what the expectation the customer should have when they first walk in then? Like to manage the expectations?
I think so. I think there's a lot of things that people, I call it subconscious chaos. I feel that the world outside of any restaurant or bar is chaotic, whether it be getting to work through traffic or your shitty boss at work. Can I swear on the podcast?
Go for it, dude. Dude, you can say whatever you want. You're good.
Your shitty boss at work, or the crappy lunch you had, or you got pooped on by a seagull on the way to the restaurant.
Which, by the way, I got shit on twice in the same day in 2 different locations by birds like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Down on Government Street and Wharf Street is pretty aggressive.
One was right by the Inner Harbor.
Yeah.
I was having Hanks, like eating my burger.
As you do.
It hit me in the head. And then I went to Mai Tai for dinner. And then standing outside there, I got crapped on again. And it hasn't happened any other day in the past like 20, 30 years. But it happened twice on that day.
It's a lucky day.
I know. I wanted to buy a lottery ticket.
You should have.
And I didn't get to one.
So I think with the experience, like, I see it as when people are out there in their ecosystem, it's chaotic and noisy and loud and disorganized. But when you step through over that threshold, it should be paced and comfortable and neat and organized and almost regimented to a degree. I look at it as like a duck on water. You know, like a duck on water looks peaceful and calm, just gleaming across the top of the water. But underneath that water, those legs are just like churning hard so they don't sink. And so that's what I see as a restaurant. So when I was growing up, when I first started in the restaurant industry, I worked in a fine dining, like super fine dining, silver service style place. And everything was like thumbnails and angles and all that sort of stuff. And I've kept that sort of mentality that the maitre d' sort of fell to me, because when you sit at a table, regardless of how chaotic your brain is, when you sit at that table and you see that organization and the straight lines and the edges and everything, it just should subconsciously calm you. And you should feel comfortable in a space straight away. It doesn't matter if you're a fine dining restaurant where you're wearing a suit and a tie. It's that nature of systems and places and everything that sort of ties in, whether it be the music, the uniforms. I've been really big on uniforms in the last couple of years when it comes to like, what does the uniform say about the venue? How the music sounds, what's the lighting like? What's everybody else drinking? What are the glassware like? Those little things in people's heads, they will never register them, but subconsciously it sets a tone. And bit by bit, you want to take them down from that chaos to this sort of almost like a tuning fork. Ding! And you just want to bring them down to this place where they're just comfortable and calm when they sit down at a table and they're like, oh, my water's here. My plate, well, it's a little bit difficult with COVID right now. We've got our drop zone here on the table, but like my cup's here, my cutlery is here, my glass gets put down on this side, I get picked up on the left side. So it's these little things that I try and take out this sort of chaotic noise that happens in people's lives out there.
And one thing you said there was about uniforms.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never really, I guess I have sort of paid attention to people in like uniforms in restaurants, but I haven't really paid attention, I don't think. So I was just thinking about that here with you mentioning that. And so what do you think with a uniform? What should that really say?
I think it should set a tone. We're slowly but surely progressing that, probably in October, going back to the chef coats, very similar to what we had at FTW back in the day. where everybody, like all the bar staff will be in chef coats, like nice short sleeve. They're comfortable. You wear a t-shirt on it. You can go commando on it if you really want to. It's just the most airy, breezy wonderfulness that it is. West, one of my crew, one of my kids at FTW, he's over at Olo now. Said it perfectly when someone asked him about the chef coats. He's like, when I'm getting ready for work, I don't have to worry about the way I look. I don't have to worry about my tie, my vest being dry cleaned, anything like that. I show up in a t-shirt. I throw on my vest. It's got my name on it. It's got the emblem on it. And all my team looks the same. And our goal is the same. Our duties are the same. Our goal is to make you as happy as possible. And it has nothing to do with whether or not I'm wearing the swankiest bow tie, or my tie pin's right, or my vest is pressed. It's about coming in and just serving the customer.
And I guess that's removing friction for your employees, because now you're making it easier for them. Yep. They don't have to worry about any of that. You just show up and just do your best.
Yep. And we all have a common goal. Like I'm from a military family, so my dad was ex-military, and so I'm the eldest of 6 as well. So we're all 18 months apart. So like growing up as eldest of family in a ex-military family, having this sort of rhythm and regimentation, and it does sort of go against the easy breezy flow of the West Coast a little bit to a degree, but when everybody has that same goal in mind, when everybody has that same thought process, that same movement, everything, your personality really comes out, because all the other stuff you usually think about, whether like again, uniform or the way that you pour or something like that, all that gets taken away, and your true personality just comes out to the customer, because everybody can do the exact same movement and the exact same cocktail, the exact same way, the exact same time and speed, and it's just about the customer service.
And you mentioned FTW,
yes.
And unfortunately, I never got in there when it was open, and I was so devastated when I saw that it closed down.
Yes,
yeah,
so was I.
Yeah, how would you describe FTW? What that was when it was open for anyone that didn't go?
FTW was an interesting little thing, because the space called for like this 1950s LA vibe.
And for people that don't know, it's across the hall from Bartholomew's.
And Bartholomew's is gone now too.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Bart's is shut down too. So,
oh, no.
Yeah. So it was this little 38-seat space that had been around for about 20, 30 years. Now, nothing had really gone in there that had been successful. And we turned into this 1950s LA. What it reminded me is when you go to the LA Strip, down from the movie lots and stuff, like you drive down these strips and you see these bars behind big leather doors, and you'd open them up and it'd be this great space. And you can imagine Sinatra sitting in a booth having like 3 martinis and lunch in between like breaks in the movie set or the recording studio. And that's kind of what we were trying to redo. But the cool thing we did is that we definitely kept our cocktail ideas in that 50s sort of range, but then put a real big molecular spin on it. So our last menu before we shut had like a sideshow, like a circus sideshow section, where we had cocktails inspired by the circus sideshow, which included like a popcorn washed rum old fashioned style cocktail.
Ooh.
One that had a like bobbing for apples.
Yep.
And so we put that in a skull head, did a foam on top, and then sweet pickled crab apples, and put crab apples in like full-size crab apples in the drink. That actually won. That one had the foam was a hay infused foam, so I got hay and gave it a really good clean, and then soaked it in sugar syrup.
Okay.
And then turned that into a foam, so it smelled like hay on the nose, but it was bobbing for apples.
That's crazy.
And so we did this sort of like super modern molecular gastronomic molecular mixology style drinks menu, but geared it back towards the 50s. So we still had like a classic highball, which was Suntory Toki and soda. And the cool thing with that is that in the 50s, 60s, Sammy Davis Jr. was a spokesman for Suntory. If you go to YouTube, type in Sammy Davis Jr. scatting Suntory, there's a whole ad for Suntory of Sammy Davis like scatting. He never says anything except for Suntory at the very end for like 2.5 minutes. With a Suntory bottle, and he plays it like a cello. He's like doom 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 doom, and then he pours it over the cracked ice, and he's like Suntory. Puts it down. He's smoking cigarettes. He's drinking. It's just, and I was like, okay, so we're going to do a classic highball, and my crew's like, oh well, that's pretty easy. I'm like, well, no, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in 7 different styles of sparkling water. And we're going to taste Suntory Toki with all these sparkling waters to see which one goes best. And then you start really geeking out about sparkling water with whiskey. And so we taste all these sparkling waters and we're like, okay, this one. And it's just random French sparkling water, really small bubbles from Bossa imports that we had to pick up from Market on Yates every couple of days. And that's all it was, just double shot of Suntory Toki with this very specific sparkling water. It just tasted money, sold tons of them, but it's just a classic whiskey highball. So
it's amazing that though with water, how water can change everything. Because we went to a sake brewery in Japan when I was there with Anton. Wow. We went to one of them right by Mount Fuji. So they had in the main place where you could buy everything, and in the main area there, they had this little well kind of with water from Mount Fuji coming out.
Seriously?
And you could just take a glass and put it under and drink it. And it was like buttery. I've never had water like that in my life.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It was the most insane thing. And then like when we got private tours at Yamazaki and Hakushu.
Of course you did.
which were sick. But going to those tours, like we learned that they put those breweries in those locations because of the water. That's why.
It's mental, isn't it?
It's crazy.
Like, and people think like, oh, the water doesn't really matter. I'm like, yeah, but if the alcohol content's 40, then that means 60% of that bottle is water. Like 40% alcohol, the rest is water. Like it means something. We did the same thing with going back to FTW. We did the Frank Sinatra, and it was just a triple pour of Jack Daniel's single barrel because that was Frank's. He was a Jack Daniel's drinker. So we did a triple, and we poured like 7 still waters to put on the side. Hand carved ice. Triple pour of the Jack Daniel's single barrel with a side of water, and we went through all these waters. And I picked up Evian, and I thought, it's just gonna be the baseline. It's gonna be like if we're gonna do all these waters, that's gonna be the one that's just like, it's good, but it's the baseline. And we all agreed that the Evian was the best. And then West was doing a little bit more research once we started opening, and we found this old Sinatra rider for one of his performances, and it lists like his vodka, and he has to have these sort of M&Ms and sardines and so on and so forth. But the key was these bottles of Jack Daniels and then bottles of room temperature Evian water. And I'm like, well, obviously, like Frank drank his Jack Daniels with a splash of Evian. And I was like, okay, obviously it means something. It's serendipitous. So that's on the menu now.
That's sick. Do you think you'll ever open another bar in town?
I got asked that question today, actually. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I will never say never.
Well, I mean, like, again, you do so much stuff. Like, where would you have the time to do that? But
I've taken back over this place.
I know. And we're gonna get into that. I wanted to ask you, though, too, about Soole Hospitality Concepts. Okay. And just to sort of explain to everyone what that was.
I think that's probably the main reason why I probably wouldn't open something else. Like, I love opening bars. Like, I love opening bars and restaurants. I love that grind, that work that it takes to build a team and build a menu and stuff like that. I don't think it's the best use of my skills and my time in this day, in this time. I think that's more it, is that it takes everything that I'm sort of doing right now and just puts it into one channel very quickly. It's like, you're doing this and this and this, but then when you open a place, it's like, okay, you do everything for that one place. And I think...
So do you feel like you're going to be able to reach a lot more people or have a bigger impact?
I think that's what it is. I think opening a venue is great, but from a pure legacy point of view, and I think over the last couple of years, like when I opened up Little Jumbo in 2013, and I left here, and then I did FTW in 2017. I think legacy has changed definitions for me, and legacy used to be like a venue-specific legacy, whereas now SHC and all the things that I'm doing, my legacy is tweaked. Like, my legacy is not so much having one team of 3 or 4 people that I train and take to a certain level. It's industry wide, and it's not about just making one venue really, really good. It's about making as many venues as I can good, whether it be interior design and construction or online marketing or social media and all that sort of stuff. So I think
you'll basically advise like a business or a restaurant on everything they need to do?
I can take now with everything that I'm doing, I can take from a napkin concept to post operations all within my companies.
Wow.
I've got a branding and design guy who does menus and logos and everything. So he's done all my branding. He actually did Little Jumbo branding back in the day. So funnily enough, with the tattoo, he sent me this through, and because I was just so busy with the opening of Little Jumbo, I forgot to message him back and say, yeah, it's really good. And then I went and got the tattoo. And so he saw my Facebook post with the tattoo, and he texts me, he's like, so you're happy with the branding? I'm like, yep.
Yeah, you're committed for life.
Yeah. So I got the tattoo literally the day we signed the lease for Jumbo. But I think legacy-wise, I think that's what's sort of, as you get older, I think, like before, it's not ego-driven, but it's very, you want to sort of accomplish something by a certain age in the industry, like opening your own venue or so on and so forth. And I think it's changed now where like Mike Norberry, you interviewed him and Anton Fine, like he was one of my kids. And, so I've got like this whole sort of brood of bartenders that I sort of train and mentor and talk to and stuff like that. So I think I see that as my legacy more so than a singular, almost inward feeling of like opening your own venue.
Well, I would say this is amazing because it sounds like you have really good self-awareness.
Yeah, it's taken me a long time. Like,
of course, it takes time to get more data,
yeah.
Right?
It's taken me like opening 3 venues last year in like 5 months in Singapore was a huge experience.
Yeah. So how did that happen?
So that was through a few things, but one of my good friends who used to be here in Victoria moved to Singapore about 6 years ago. And he opened a place there, and then they want to expand. And I think he reached out to me May 1st or just before May 1st last year. And I was like, oh, we're talking about doing this concept, and here's the concept sheets and design work and stuff. I'm like, okay, cool. And I think I was on vacation with the family at that time. I came home for a week, and I went to Portugal to speak at the Lisbon Bar Show. And I had a Zoom meeting or a phone meeting with them, a video call conference when I was there, and I wrote the contract up while I was in Lisbon. I came back from Lisbon for 1 week, and then I flew to Singapore for 2.5 months. So
and you opened 3 restaurants in
3 restaurants in 5 months.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So a lot of the design and sort of layout work had been done, but none of the menus, none of the hiring and that sort of thing. And I think I posted a video on May 1st when I first landed. Oh, sorry, not May 1st, May 27th when I first landed in Singapore. It's just like dirt floors, a little bit of framing, and that's it. And then we opened that on June 3rd. So literally a month between landing and thing. I had to do a full menu, full wine list, full food dev. And then we opened up a little cocktail bar. So the first restaurant was like 70 seats in the front called Misfits. Very Spanish style, Mediterranean, Greek islands sort of feel to it. And then in the back, they want to do like a 15-seat speakeasy called Roxy. And that was going to be Latin America. So new world, old world, sort of, new world, old world. And so we did all Latin America. So lots of rum, tequila, mezcal, soto, that sort of thing. And then my second visit back in, I think, August, was to do the third venue, which was called Bayside, over right on Fullerton Place. So, Singapore's the big 3-tower yacht on the top sort of deal, literally straight across from that. And the group that owned that area had basically leveled a garden bed to put this bar in, and it was horribly designed. And sort of like we tried to get our finger in the pie earlier on design, and so we had to really rip everything out and start again. And so that opened along with Roxy, my second visit. And so 3 venues in 5 months.
And how many restaurants would you say you've worked in or had a hand in over the years? Since
Little Jumbo in 2013, I worked at 13 venues.
Wow.
In one way, shape, or form, from consulting on designing, opening, owning. Yeah. So like 13 venues in 7 years.
And how, with the consulting and that, how did that come to be that you sort of got into that role? Like, was it just a natural thing that just over time you just realized that this is something I'm good at and I have vision, or how did that work?
That was a hard slog, to be honest with you, because it's something that's never really existed in Victoria anyway. And so when I did Cafe Mexico, like we talked about Cafe Mexico, that was a cold call. I literally reached out on Facebook. I was like, saw the article, you're reopening, would love to help out. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Like, let's sit down, chat, and see how much. Like, so I gave them a quote.
Because something that stands out for me at Mexico was you were doing something where one of the barrels, like, you wouldn't fully empty it, and you would sort of mix different, like,
so they were aged.
Yeah, and that was a really cool thing where you're getting different ages of the alcohol.
Yeah, so that those sort of things. The good thing is that Brad and Hilda are amazing operators. Brad's been doing it for 30-something years. Like, Cafe Mexico was 30 years old. Before that, he had 2 or 3 restaurants. So he used to own the restaurant that was in the Bent Mast before the Bent Mast. Absolutely amazing operator. And so pairing up with them, it was a lot of work because the scope of the work, once we really started digging in, like, the floors had to get replaced because they were fire damaged. All the walls had to get sandblasted because they were fire damaged. But we had to be careful on the walls because they're 120-year-old brick. And so the guys who came in and sandblasted it too heavy with too heavy grit. So then we had to get them all repointed. And I remember just before I flew out to Tales of the Cocktail for a seminar, I literally climbed up on a ladder and a ruler and chalk and designed that back bar, like, with like a ladder and chalk. So I left with this big slabbed wall of plywood with boxes drawn in chalk. I was like, this is the boxes that you need to put in. And then they just built boxes and screwed them in on that side. So that was like everything from the basic booths across in the bar and everything I designed from, like, by hand, drafted out. And so I think when it came to consulting here in Victoria, I had to make the decision, if I was going to do it, that I had to attack it. It couldn't be like, wait for it to happen. It had to be like, if some place burned down or a place needed work, like, I'd hit up places that I'd go and have cocktails. I'm like, your cocktails are rubbish. Like, don't mean to be rude, but like, you're a Caribbean bar that doesn't serve good mojitos. Let me help you out. And so there was a little bit of, well, it's a little bit of humility because you're sort of asking for work, but also there's a little bit of arrogance in the fact that you think you can do better than they're doing. So it's just sort of balancing act. So I helped out Guild for a long time before they got taken over. I helped out with their training and beer program and so on and so forth, inventory and the financial back end stuff. I'm helping Sizzling Tandoor with their expansion right now. I helped them with the first time round on Johnson Street, Japanese Village's little lounge. I did nothing with the cocktail program at all because they didn't want anything with the cocktail program, but I came in, I redesigned the bar, ripped out the sushi bar. My contractor ripped out the sushi bar. My interior designer paired everything up because we couldn't really upgrade the space because Japanese Village is Japanese Village. So we had to sort of like try and pair everything up with 30-year-old decor. That Japanese Village is still going to be Japanese Village and it's always awesome, but we had to pair it up, which is really difficult. We had to pull a guy out of retirement to pour the bar top because he did the original bar top in 1978 or something. So we pulled him out of retirement to lay down the new bar top.
Is that purely because of the fact he was in it before? Did he do something unique? He
did something super unique. It was a very specific resin mix with flake that got dropped into a mold, and we couldn't find anyone in town to do it. So they pulled this guy out of retirement and pulled like this bar top to match everything.
That's crazy.
So, but it was just bit by bit of like this sort of a balancing act between humility and arrogance to sort of build the business up, which I still have to do now. I have to remind myself to keep doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah. Do you ever struggle like with ego? Is that ever a thing that you battle with? Like your ego says, oh, you should do this, but you know it really, you shouldn't do that?
I have a concept called my banner and my Hulk.
Okay.
So my wife sees my banner, my very vulnerable, like second guessing, constantly not very confident person, which I am. I've got hardcore social anxiety and introvertness, which people go, no. But then my Hulk is the guy you see behind the bar. He's the guy who's like, hey, 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 hey. And so I'm constantly struggling with Hulk and Banner.
How difficult do you find it to be able to recharge?
I don't take days off. I take hours off.
Okay.
So, but I find the things that make me happy in the shortest period of time. So spending time with my family. Now, mainly, my wife is ridiculous. Like I said, my wife is ridiculous understanding. My daughter is too. They know that if I go out for a hike or breakfast, that's my recharge time. I can recharge pretty quickly. But then I find things that are just for me as well. So I love my cigars. So smoking a cigar on the back deck, just chilling out. I'll be on my phone. I'll be doing social media, or I'll be answering emails during this time, or I'll have my laptop on my lap. But it's my time. Like, it's my time to just relax with a whiskey and a cigar. And I'll just chill out like that. So for me, recharging is not really a necessary thing, because I wake up every morning, sometimes rough, sometimes good. But it's that chase, it's that process, it's that like constant, like, okay, what do I have to achieve today? Like, I know what I have to do. Obviously, COVID's very hard for everybody right now because it's very repetitive, because you can't go out, you can't go sit at the coffee shop and do your edits of your book, you got to sit in your office and do that. But I find that's what keeps me going. It's that all the time.
So you straight up love the process, like Gary Vee says.
Yes.
Because you enjoy every part of it. You're not.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to rah it and say like I love it all the time. There's times when I wake up and it's like,
when I do these podcasts, there's parts of this process that I hate.
Yeah.
When I'm actually putting it together, there's some parts that I really don't like.
And you're just like, oh, I just want this to be done, or I just want a break, or I just want something. And so I never try and rah. I try and keep very, like, a couple of weeks ago, on a Saturday, like, I just did a massive, like, 12-hour shift here. It was busy. And I woke up, and I'm a part of a charity organization out of Toronto called the Bartenders Benevolent Fund. So usually on Saturday morning, we do a big meeting and go through all the grants and say, yes, you get money, no, you get money, don't, and so on and so forth. And so that's usually at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so I had to do that, and then I had to do some errands for this place. And I actually stopped and I tweeted out to everybody. I was like, you know what? I can handle this most of the time. Today's hard. Like, today's a hard one. You know, I've had 3 nitros. I'm bad. My feet are killing me. Like, being back behind the bar was absolutely great. Next morning, not so much, because my feet ache, my knees are bad. And so, like, I like to show people that there's some vulnerability to it. Like, I'm not a steamroller that just keeps going and going and going. Like, there is times when I was like, most of the time I'm super positive, want everybody to succeed. You can do it. You can do it. You can do it. And there's other times I'm like, I just want to go back to bed. I want to spend time with my wife.
Are you naturally a positive person?
Ooh.
Because
man, that's a curveball.
Well, no, it just popped into my head. The reason why I ask is because I'm not, and everyone a lot of people that know me, they all think like I'm always super positive, but I make a conscious choice to be that way.
I would say I'm a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Growing up, like I said, I grew up in a big family. I went to 14 different schools between preschool and grade 12, and 2 of those schools I went to for 3 years and 4 years. So you can imagine I think I went to grade 5, like 4 grade 5 schools. So having friends, moving, I had a very upheaval life, like upbringing with my family. We moved around a lot. My dad was ex-military, and so in the back of your head, you sort of got to shut that voice up. And I think that's a little bit goes back to that Banner and Hulk of like, you got to shut that voice up sometimes and let Hulk drive. Of like, oh, shit's going good right now. Something bad's going to happen soon. Like, oh, you've made some good friends at school. You're starting to fit in. You're not the weird geeky kid who like should be 2 grades ahead and nailing through all his classes and wearing secondhand clothes and shit, like the weird like secondhand clothes, not the good secondhand clothes, like weird secondhand clothes at a new school, and then you got to move again and start the process all over again. So I think it's a little bit of column. Like, there's days when I wake up, I'm just like, gun-ho, like freaking loving life. The patio, to be honest, like last week, the big win for me was putting the patio out the front at Clive's. Like that had been a 1 month stress ball in my head. As soon as that happened, it like took a weight off my shoulder.
Yeah. Who came up with that idea then? Was it you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think with Clive's, like there's always going to be that hook. You know, like when you come to Clive's, like without bar seats as well, which really is a killer, you'd come to Clive's back in the day and you go, oh, I might be able to get sit at the bar, but if I sit at the floor, that'll be okay. But without bar seats, what's the hook? You know, sitting on the floor, you can still get a great experience from the staff, are great here. Me and Dave get out from behind the bar and touch tables, kiss babies and stuff. But now with the patio, it's like, okay, well, let's go into Clive's. We may get onto the patio. If we don't get on the patio, I'll be okay with inside. So that's now the hook. So now, like last week was like twice as busy as we've had since we reopened.
I love it.
Which was huge. And it leans back into the sort of European aperitivo style that I want Clive to sort of go back into that direction. Aperol spritzers, Negronis, Americanos. This week on the happy hour menu, I'm putting Averna lemonade back on the menu, which is Averna and lemon tonic, which is money. So it's sort of gearing back to where I want Clive's to be in the next 6 months.
And those happy hour menus, do you change those every week?
Happy menus, they're evolving. Because I'm trying to wind down my beer program to be a bit smaller, wind down my wine program to be a bit smaller, and we're putting more more cocktails on tap. So probably Friday this week, I think Quinn messaged me. So Quinn and Michaela have got the Squire White Wine Company, their dry vermouth and tonic. They're exclusively kegging that for us, and so they're going to keg it and carbonate it, pre-mixed and everything on site there, and just deliver us kegs. And then we just tap it, and we'll have vermouth and tonic on tap. So that's kind of cool.
That's amazing.
So in the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll probably see. We've already got Negronis on tap, vermouth and tonic on tap, Aperol spritzers on tap, and a prosecco on tap. And so we're just cutting down our beer program just because we don't sell enough beer, and cocktails sell. So
how did this come to be with you coming back to Clive's?
That's a good story. So Jace and Alicia have been here pretty much since I left. So Jace took over from me when I left in 2013 to open Jumbo. And just during COVID, he took the chance to sort of take a look inward of what I shouldn't really talk for Jace, but like take a look at what he wanted to do in the industry. And working late nights, it's a drag. It does take a toll on your body. So working late nights and working a beast that is Clive's. Like Clive's is a huge responsibility as a brand to continue constantly. It's a little bit of a hamster in the wheel, and the hamster doesn't stop. And so he took the opportunity to step away and sort of reevaluate. And he's now a manager over at Vessel Liquor, which I think is awesome.
I love Vessel. I was just in there a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And my girlfriend found something. She's like, oh my God, I had this in Edmonton. I couldn't find it anywhere. Yeah. And here we go. Some
of the weirdest stuff in there, which is great. But so yeah, he's over there, he's got a work-life balance, which I actually did a podcast today about work-life balance, because it is very, like you said, self-aware. Like my work-life balance is not like someone else's work-life balance, and I shouldn't aspire to your work-life balance, or so on and so forth. And so I reached out to the hotel and I was like, hey, so heard you're looking for someone. Would you be up for listening, like sitting down and having a chat? So we had a chat, and I think a few things that are happening in the city with like Veneto no longer being Veneto, and sort of losing that sort of foundation of cocktail culture, which Veneto is like literally it's Clive's and Veneto, then Jumbo on top, and Cenote and Sherwood and Wind Cries Mary and Nubo now and stuff like that. So it's losing like a big foundational chunk out of our industry, out of our culture, I think was a big blow to me personally. Not because I had anything like invested in Veneto apart from the kids that work there and mentoring them, but it was just like one of those things. Is like,
did you work with all of them there?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay.
Like Brant was with me at Little Jumbo. Mikey was with me at FTW.
Yeah.
So most of them had been with me in one way, shape, or form. But it was a fact. It sort of with that sort of happening, it took me way back to 2009 when I first took over Clive's, and we literally had Clive's and Solomon's. And then Veneto came on the scene, and Solomon's left the scene. And so it took me back to like like one of those like flashback Walt Disney style, like when what's his name tastes Ratatouille for the first time and he goes back to his childhood. It was literally like a flashback back to 2009 when I was like remembering Clive's, like when I tell stories about Clive's back in the day when I first took over, and Saturday nights would be me and chef, so no support, no floor staff, just me on the floor, chef in the back, and I'd ring out $120, not in tips, like $120 in sales on a Saturday night. And that sort of slow, progressive build and sacrifice and work, and like texting all your friends to come down and have cocktails, because cocktails just weren't a thing at all in 2009. And so it took me back to this time where like cocktail culture was just a slow burn, and that wasn't quick. Like people think that Clive's happened really quickly. Like I took over in May 2009. I would say that Clive's became Clive's in October 2010. So like 18 months of this excruciating slow burn.
Was it acknowledgeable for you when that happened? Like looking back, you can sort of see the shift, I guess, or the change.
Yeah.
But at the time, could you acknowledge that? Like, did it ever hit?
Not on a level that I was aware of. Not on a level that I was like, I'm making a difference. And then 2010 sort of happened. I got a new bartender on. 2011 and 2012, we got the back-to-back world's best bar in the like top 4 world's best hotel bar at Sales of the Cocktail, which still no other bar in all of Canada has even got to the top 4 ever.
Yeah, that's insane.
And this is 2011 and 2012. So the amount of work it took to that. So like when Veneto sort of disappeared and sort of dissolved, it sort of pushed me to go, okay, well, I made a joke to the kids and I was like, oh, dad's going to come out of retirement and freaking like pick up the bootstraps. Yeah. But like it really coming back to Clive's was really a legacy thing. It goes back to legacy is like, I would really horribly regret coming in here 6 months. If I said no to the opportunity, coming back in 6 months and it all going to worse, like to crap. And me walking in going, man, I could have saved this place. I could have, not that it was in a bad spot, but like if I could really have made a difference here. And that's why I sat down and talked to the wife really hard. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Do I have time for this? Like, you know, I can probably do 35 hours a week here. It's mainly night sides. So it's just extending out some of the work that I do. And she's like, oh, I think it'd be really good for you to go back and just have that sort of that place. And so I bit the bullet, and coming back has been the hardest and the most rewarding thing I've done in a I shouldn't say in a while, but like, you know, on a different level, like on that sort of very bartending pillar sort of level. It's been one of the most rewarding things on that.
And so for you coming back and sort of having that type of feeling, what's been the coolest thing you think so far since you've come back here?
The customers. Having the guests back, having some people who I know supported Clive's back before it was cool. You know, Chef Corey from Whole Beast.
Yeah, Corey's awesome.
Yeah, Corey's fantastic. He used to come here in 2009, 2010 and be one of those people on a Saturday night sitting at the bar for 3-4 hours, having Pisco Sours and Fernet and Cokes. He'd bring Shawn down. And Shawn and Michelle, who were starting dating in 2009, when they used to come in here, are now married with a kid, you know. So I think it's that response of, while on a physical level, it's hard to work behind the bar again, going on 40, that response of people going, I'm so happy that you're back. Like it goes back to that people pleaser thing. Like it's that, like people coming back here for some of the people have come back for the first time in like 5 years, 6 years. They haven't come back since I left, it is a bit of massive ego stroke, but like it's also one of those things is like, to have that sort of brand confidence from the consumers is a huge thing. Like having that confidence where someone's willing to just like have that sort of symbiotic relationship and just go, what are you working on? Just give it to me.
I was going to ask, how many people just come in and like get you to make something on the spot?
Lots.
What percentage do you think?
Lots.
Because one thing we Anton and I found when we were in Japan, and we went to Lamp Bar. I don't know if you're familiar with Machito.
No.
Okay. Yeah. He, I think he was named the best bartender in the world in 2015. Or or it was some very prestigious award. And when we went in there, it was a little speakeasy bar, and they had actually 2 hidden bars on either side of the main room.
Wow!
So it was like a hidden door. One of them was some luggage that you would push the door back and go through into a whole bar.
So a speakeasy within a speakeasy within a speakeasy.
Yes. And then when you first walked in, there was a mirror right here on the right. And that mirror would slide back and there'd be a whole another bar there. But there was no menu at that bar. You went in, he would ask you what you liked. And then he would just sort of stand there and think about it for a second. And he had his little notepad. And they were dressed all, there was a reason why they were wearing what they were wearing. Every bottle was there for a reason. And it was just a very different experience to experience something like that.
But when you walked in, didn't you feel that like that center? Like
I felt like the place knew what it was.
Yeah.
And it was just, everything was exactly how it should be. There was no, it was very calm.
No fuss and no muss.
There wasn't. Yeah. No. It was just, it knew what it wanted to be. That's what it was. And everything was in the place where it needed to be. It was very, very relaxing. And then just to have him come and the confidence of him, like he was very sort of more, very quiet, but you could tell like he knows his stuff.
Yeah.
And then he brings it out and then he brings you a drink and explains what it is. And like one of them, I think he took Crown Royale and redistilled it and made his own stuff with it. And then he had like a bitter that he had made with some sake and all this stuff. And it was madness. It was crazy.
And that's just the thing is like, again, it goes back to, I think we were talking about it earlier, is like culture, whether it be cocktail, wine, whatever. Cocktail culture isn't built off creativity, it's built off consistency. And that consistency then breeds confidence. And then once you have that confidence in the brand, you know you can go there for absolutely anything. You know that the drinks are always consistently good. Like they're creative, but they're always consistently good. Like you can have a creative drink once and it's great. Next one's not so great. The second visit is horrible. But it's that consistency of awesomeness that you've got to sort of keep. Because then that breeds, like I can walk up to a table now and go, you usually drink XYZ, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, I got something new for you. And they'll be like, cool. And they're like, you can see them go, well, what is it? I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. And I'll go off and make it and bring it out to them, put them down for them. Like, oh, this is awesome. Like the Averna and Lemon Tonic. Like Corey was in and I'm like, I know you like Fernet and Cokes. I know that you like Pisco Sours. I know you like these drinks. I'm like, you're going to love this Averna and Lemon Tonic because it tastes like a old school sort of Coca-Cola sort of sarsaparilla sort of thing with a lemon twist.
That would be amazing.
And it's just 2 ounces of Averna, topped with lemon tonic. Like a bit of lemon. And it's just money. And I'm like, that's as simple as drink and people are just going to eat that up.
And I guess that's because of your expertise. You know what somebody else doesn't know that they don't know.
Yeah.
I guess. You can make that connection maybe.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like people do want to let go. You just got to build that confidence up in people so that they feel so comfortable with you that they'll say yes to anything. It's the same thing with like sushi, like talking about Japan, like sushi restaurants. You'll go and you'll sit at a sushi bar and you'll talk to the sushi chef and he may give you like 3 very like rudimentary dishes that are very classic, but then you're sort of like, well, where's your weird stuff? And then all of a sudden his eyes will light up and he'll be like, oh, you want weird stuff. Here's some mackerel and here's some sea urchin and here's some, like, he'll give you the tuna roll and the prawns and stuff like that to start.
Yeah.
But then when you start like building that rapport, all of a sudden he's like sliding mackerel to you, sliding some smoked eel, some sea urchin. There you go. And all of a sudden you're sort of building this sort of symbiotic relationship. And it takes a really long time. Like, and that's the thing is like goes back to that, like those years and years of Clives of even when Clives in 2010 became super popular and won awards and all this sort of stuff, it's still work. And I sometimes have to remind myself when I do like new places, whether it be Little Jumbo, FTW, Cafe Mexico, that I sort of have to always take it back to a zero to sort of start again. And I think that's always the key is like Cafe Mexico, great. Yes, I'm running the bar program. I was the general manager, but I've got great people running the bar program and they're making the cocktails. You've got to still build confidence in a whole new myriad of customers because the people who go to Clive's, Little Jumbo, Veneto weren't coming to Cafe Mexico in the beginning. The first couple of months were all old Cafe Mexico clientele who were used to their Tex-Mex and free tortillas and dip and all that sort of stuff. And all of a sudden they're getting like hardcore Durango cuisine, and
That place was so different after.
high-end cocktails.
So different. It was amazing.
It's literally one of the things that I regret doing when we rebranded, that we didn't change the brand up from Cafe Mexico. That we didn't change the brand to align more to the direction we're going, especially with Chef Wazé now there. He is doing some epic, like classic, like Mexican dishes. I don't think chimichangas are on the menu anymore because the menu had to get truncated for COVID. He took the opportunity to go, okay, no more chimichangas. And so he's geared it much more towards like traditional Mexican food. Like I know that he goes to Mexico, well, before COVID, obviously, he was going to Mexico 1 or 2 times a year and eating all the Michelin star restaurants in Mexico City and stuff like that, and really experiencing Mexican cuisine on a whole different level. And he is just a phenomenal chef. He is like one of the most talented Mexican chefs I've ever experienced in my whole entire life. His tacos are on point. Everything that he does is on point. Thanks for listening, Pose Shifters. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I really enjoy sitting down with friends and peers and just chatting about the industry and getting down to the nuts and bolts of what's really going on out there. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, everything on all the platforms. Just hit it up and I'll do my best to answer any queries or questions you have. I'll see you next week, guys. Bye.